Joyce's sister Ava's oldest daughter. And I'm very honored to give a tribute to Aunt Joyce. The things I know were family memories, and I didn't grow up in St. James, so I know there's many more. And Uncle Hal's here, Betty's husband, so I know he has a lot, but these are just a few because there's so many. Joyce's smile, laughter, and love of song was contagious in her kitchen or a crowded hall. Joyce did not blink an eye or act like anything was different when her entire house was filled with children. We would spend a couple of weeks in St. James at the Dodge house every summer. Joyce was always excited to see us, and we never thought that it may have been different for her to have 5 rambunctious children sleeping all over the small two-bedroom home. Mike and Bill both would want the tiny room behind the kitchen, as it had a little bookshelf with a cozy bed where they could kind of hide out and read. And that room was Nick's when he was growing up. So that was an in-demand room. Nick, I don't know if you knew that. A few of us slept on the back porch. That was my favorite, on a pull-out couch, because we could hear all the outside noises and felt like we were camping, which we had never done at that stage of our life. The rest were in the living room. Aunt Joyce loved life and was always busy. She really loved music. She had her own organ, and she would play for us. And when she wasn't playing, we were pounding on it and stomping on the pedals, which she never seemed to get upset about. She loved church hymns, ladies' church group, gardening, cooking, reading, singing, watching Jeopardy, and just plain talking. All the sisters, my mother and them, talked, and they all talked at one time. We were never sure if anyone listened, but they seemed to know what each other thought, so someone must have listened at one point. Joyce was in excellent health as she walked back and forth to town every day to help at their hardware store and do general errands. Joyce was an excellent cook with homemade multi-course dinners using the bounty from her huge garden. She cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 2 weeks while we were there, and we didn't think a thing, just what's the next meal? And that must have been stressful, because at that point, Nick was gone, so it was just her and Noel. She always had homemade bread, biscuits, and cookies. A common memory of all the cousins was the job of shelling peas on the front porch. There was a gigantic snowball bush by the steps that smelled so pretty in the summer air. I've always wanted that, and now we have planted 6 of those in our front yard. I don't know how she did it. We only have 1 alive, but we all loved that the St. James baseball field was next door to their little garage. Noel would put a lawn chair on the roof, which is what taught us these experiences, and watch the game. We all thought that was the greatest, as we were getting into the game free, and we were climbing on a roof and nobody was stopping us. There was a lot of shenanigans with climbing on that garage, including getting yelled at by the baseball coaches to stop throwing things at the ball field, which of course Noel and Joyce did not know was going on. There was a big tree that hung over the roof that added to the antics. Noel and Joyce stored their storm windows against the little garage. Cousin Mark, the pastor, who doesn't do things wrong, did a gymnastics stunt off the garage roof and landed on the windows. Of course, no one ever knew how all those windows got broken. Avis and Alice were twins. Avis was my mother. When Alice passed away, her 3 small children came to live with Joyce and Noel for a few years, as their father was a career Navy man. Joyce's church and religion were a central focus of her life. She sang in the choir and was present for all of the church activities. Chuck Chimberg, my mother's twin sister Alice's son, who is 1 year older than me and I've been speaking to all week, told the following story that he wanted related at the funeral, as he could not come. On Sundays, when Aunt Joyce sang in the church choir, she would put Chuck in the church nursery somewhere in the building. Joyce was in front of the church singing in the choir, and all of a sudden, there was Chuck crawling down the main aisle, must have been right there, crying out, "Joyce!" And he spells it J and about 10 O's, and then Y-C-E, over and over. Aunt Joyce was was most likely embarrassed, but maybe not as she took everything else in stride. She ran down the aisle, scooped up little Chuck, and returned him to the nursery. Joyce always called him Chugger after that, as she said he was always chugging around on his hands and knees. When Chuck visited her recently, she knew who he was when he said, "Chugger is here." Chuck sends the following quote, as he could not make it to Minnesota. "So, Aunt Joyce, Chugger is here. I love you and miss you. I know you enjoyed singing to that choir, but someday I'll join you. You'll hear me coming. I'll be out with Joyce." It's just very sad because Chuck's wife died last week too, so he's burying her today in California. Well, we will all miss Joyce, Aunt Joyce's smile, laughter, and joy of life. She was an incredible sister, mother, grandmother, wife, aunt, and friend. Joyce touched so many people's lives, and her kindness and fun-loving spirit will not be forgotten in this world. So many of our happy, funny, loving, and special memories were spent in St. James with Aunt Joyce and Uncle Noel. Joyce has gone to heaven to be with Noel and her sisters. We cousins have spent the last week reminiscing the wonderful times we spent at the little house on 7th Street, next to the baseball park. The last Toline sister is now gone and we miss them. Peace be with you and goodbye, Aunt Joyce. Oh, I have a couple more memories that were somewhere. The Lutz boys' favorite fun was to go to Woolworths and get parachute men that they dropped off the garage, and of course had to climb up and down and up and down and all these rambunctious kids running around a yard that was full of vegetables and fruits in the backyard and a huge flower growing in the side yard. There was a lot of accidental trampling, but Joyce never seemed to be bothered by the chaos. All of the cousins have special memories focused around the hardware store that Noel and Joyce owned. Their store was also the home of the primary Viking sewing machine dealer for the area. Joyce was an excellent seamstress and was one of the first to learn to sew polyester clothing. Noel and Joyce were top sellers of Viking sewing machines in the Midwest and won 2 trips to Scandinavia. A favorite pastime of all the cousins, no matter how old they were, was exploring the hardware store. This was a 3- to 4-story building, including a dark basement where one descended wooden ladder steps. To get to the 3rd floor, one had to climb a ladder and enter a black abyss as the windows were all boarded up. There was the sound and movement of flying creatures. Steve Lutz reports his scary memory was hitting at bats with a racket he found for sale in the hardware store. Mike Wallick was never able to bring himself to enter the black scary place, as he always retreated back down the ladder and ran for his life. He went back last year and bravely conquered his fears and went upstairs. No tribute to Aunt Joyce would be complete without a mention of the Watonwan County Fair. Uncle Noel and Aunt Joyce had a sewing machine exhibit every year in the home building. Noel persuaded all of his nephews to be sewing machine demonstrators. Of course, none of them knew how to sew. Noel said that didn't matter a bit, as this would show the customers what wonderful machines the Vikings were. Bill Wallick figured out how this worked. The women would stop to see the little boys sewing, and Uncle Noel would suddenly appear, and there would be a sewing machine sold. Well, I read my final point a minute ago, but we've all come together to celebrate the lives of all 5 Toline sisters, and that's partly Joyce was the very last one, so it's a celebration for all of us, as this was a wonderful place for us all to come. So, goodbye, Aunt Joyce.